How you guys doing? I'm going to do a video here on layer opacity and fill, because there always seems to be a heck of a lot of confusion, misunderstanding, and all that around what those two things actually do, because unless you know where the difference lies, they pretty much look like they're doing exactly the same thing. So real quick, I set this up just to show you guys where that difference is. So I've got just this scene of a window, and this is a stock photo. Opacity and fill over here on the layer, if you reduce those, you know, obviously it takes down the opacity, and the fill apparently does the same thing. And truth be told, they do the same thing when you have a normal layer. The difference comes in when you start introducing layer styles and layer effects, because what fill does is it takes away all the non-effect elements inside of a layer. Real quick, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. This is just text, my photography logo, kind of a little perspective added to it just to make it look like it's on the wall, sort of, just playing around. Again, if I just reduce the opacity, it fades out, and since it's still a normal layer, it does the same thing here. But if I add some effects to it, drop shadow, bevel and emboss, and these are just things you can get through layer styles. It opens up this dialog and you can add all these different things in. If you reduce fill on this layer now, it takes away the white text but leaves the effects. So there's the drop shadow effect, and that's just the bevel and emboss. It's just the effect, it's not the actual original white text. Cool. Now if you go in and reduce the opacity, you can just fade that entire thing. What I really like about this is it actually, that bevel and emboss effect picks up the highlight that's on the wall and then fades across, so it just kind of makes it look like it's actually there in a fun kind of way. So I'm going to leave that like that and then move to, I've got this ballerina image that I've been working on in a different image, but I just dropped her in here to play with. Again, normal layer here, fill is going to act just like opacity. But if I turn that off and I've switched this layer to a linear light mode, and I'll show you why here in a minute, but I wanted to show you, if I reduce the opacity, the entire thing just kind of fades. So like right there, even the highlights and the black tones are faded off to barely visible. But if I use fill, as I bring this down, the black tones are staying, but the highlights are fading. Until you know, once you get all the way down, it goes completely invisible, but right in here you still have some solid black and all the highlights are gone. If I switch it to linear dodge, it does kind of the opposite. It keeps the highlights but the dark tones fade. Okay, it's a little subtle, but it does it a little bit differently than straight opacity. So what that means is if I use that over the top of my other layer, go back to the linear light, I can use that to really just punch the shadows down but keep the highlights looking more or less the way they were. And you know, I pull the opacity down just a little bit as well to make that a more subtle change. So different blending modes may or may not react differently with the fill. I've found like 3 or 4 of them that works just slightly different. Those differences are subtle, but you can play around with that and get some slightly different effects with the fill. But if you're just working with a normal layer and all that, it doesn't really make a difference whether you use opacity or fill. That's really it. So hope you learned a little bit with that one. I certainly did. I have been kind of in the same realm of what in the world is the difference? Why do we even have fill? Because it looked like it always did the same thing until you start playing with some of those effects. So hope you guys have an awesome day, and I will see you again later.